How's everybody doing today? My name is Andrew Cooperrider. Of course, I'm your host of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I appreciate you guys so much for joining me today. We've got a couple of topics to cover. We're going to cover, there's 3 new draft bills that have been filed over the last week. We'll be talking about recent, I don't know if you'd call it a scandal, but recent issues dealing with Jefferson County Public Schools, JCPS, and some of the material they have been providing to children. And it is pretty graphic. And so we will dig down into that. But first off, if you're listening to this on Facebook or YouTube and you want to take it on the go, but you don't want to leave that streaming, you can always listen to this in podcast platform. You can listen at Spotify and Apple and anywhere else you'd like to take a listen. Also, as well, you guys can always show your support by giving us a good old-fashioned like, comment, share, subscribe. If you're listening on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Give us a like, give us a comment. On Facebook too as well. It helps spread it out there if you give a good share. As always as well, you can text Liberty to 33777. If you pull out your phone and text the word Liberty to 33777, you'll get our updates about podcast events and some other things like that. And also, of course, I'm running for state treasurer. So please donate to the campaign at Andrew, 4, ky.com. Once again, it's Andrew, 4, ky.com. And we will go ahead and jump into it. First, we do want to take a moment to acknowledge Eastern Kentucky flooding and issues going on there. Obviously, we're seeing a fair amount of fatalities out of that flooding, and we're seeing a fair amount of strong issues that continue to go on. People are continuing to have to be searched out. And in this time is not the time to have any kind of political conversations about the area, despite as much as the left wants to use these kinds of natural disasters to in the moment, especially to talk about climate change and whatever other things they want to talk about. I think for right now, we need to just focus on saving who we can save and helping them rebuild. Maybe here in a few weeks, we'll have a conversation about the region as a whole and how government has really kind of destroyed that area of Kentucky through regulatory means and has really just destroyed that region. But until then, we just want to keep them in our prayers. And obviously, as you see opportunities to help out or volunteer, please do so. If you've ever done flood relief before, I can tell you it's messy, dirty work. You got to dig out these homes that they end up covered in mud and they need dug out. And so any opportunities you have to volunteer to help out, please do so. So moving on, though, to some of the other stories we will talk about today. We've got a couple of bills, as I said, filed here. Let's go into the first one. We've got Draft Bill 18. This is from Jeffrey Donahue. Again, if you remember last week, guys, he's the one who filed something on the property tax. And this bill here, Bill Request 18, he wants to exempt diapers and clothing from sales tax, and it will sunset the legislation on August 1st, 2027. I think that's important as we talk about it. So he wants to basically say that, hey, you don't have to charge taxes on clothing or diapers. Now, the thought process here is you don't get charged sales tax on food, water, basic things you need to survive. And so the general thought is well, let's not sales tax people on basic survival needs and instead only the extras so people aren't getting taxed to live. One of the things this thought process fails to address, though, and Donahue's last bill dealt with this, is property tax. I mean, if your thought process is we can't tax the things you need to live, what is your justification for property tax then? Because certainly you would agree we need shelter to survive, right? It's one of the 3 basic needs, food, water, and shelter. Actually, in fact, clothing and diapers isn't even in there. Food, water, and shelter is. So food and water aren't being taxed, but you are taxing shelter, which I find an interesting point to make if we're going to argue about whether or not we should be taxing on the necessities of life. Now, in general, I think we shouldn't be taxing on the necessities of life, of course. There's some less regulatory ways to do this. There's something called a prebate tax system, and it's interesting idea. The problem is you can't trust government. So prebate taxing system basically says that everything will be taxed. Nothing's exempt. Anything you buy is taxed. Food, water, doesn't matter. But every month we say, okay, well, the average person spends, let's say, $800 a month or $1,000 a month on their basic necessities, or what we'll say $1,000 to make it easy on us, $1,000 a month. So $60 is 6%, which is our state sales tax of that amount of money. So what we're going to do is we'll just go ahead and cut a check for $60 a month per person every month to just say, look, it's easier regulatorily speaking this way, where we don't have to worry about tracking, well, what's exempt, what's not exempt with stores and things like that. And we don't have to audit as much or worry about not getting paid our sales tax. Everything's is sales tax regardless what it is, unless you are a business buying something and for resale or nonprofit, it's taxed. And then we'll just issue out that prebate. The problem is that you can't really trust government actors to not grow that. You give them the ability, the opportunity to hand out $60 in cash to every person, regardless of their income level. As in the idea that I'm prebating you, I'm giving you a rebate on tax is you're paying on necessary items, and that sounds great until we have these government actors that decide to make, well, I'm going to double your prebate to 120, and let's double your prebate to 500 and whatever. And it ends up getting out of control, where it's not used as it's supposed to be used, a rebate on taxes, but rather it gets used as a welfare type program. And so that it works great in practice, but of course, as we've seen with government, they're can't stop themselves from misusing things. So that's not necessarily a great way to do it. But Donahue's coming out with some tax reformation things, mainly trying to cut taxes, it seems, to things. As I said earlier, he's in a competitive primary with Emily Callaway, a Republican. He's a Democrat in a purpley area in Louisville. It has been redistricted recently to be more friendly to the Republicans. So, he's obviously trying to appear not as extreme as the Joe Biden types and everything else. We'll see how that plays for him. Also, we'll see how these kinds of bills play out. And the fact that he's, like I said, this is a draft bill that he's pre-filing. Now, of course, if he doesn't win, those bills go away. So maybe that's it as well, right? He's trying to create those things to campaign upon, like, well, do you want to pay taxes on your diapers? And if you're over 60 paying property tax, things that we Republicans feel strongly about. But, he obviously doesn't feel like it's any kind of moral issue, because once again, bring your attention back to this. It says that the sunset bill. So this sales and use exemption will sunset on August 1st, 2027. Why would you sunset the bill? See, this is something Democrats love to do, right? When they create a program, whether it's an entitlement program or a tax incentive or something else, they want to sunset it. Why? Because it becomes a political tool. If you pass it now from on into ever, then I don't have to just elect people to keep something in place that's already there, because it's hard for people to latch onto a hypothetical of they will get rid of something. So of course, people say, well, if you elect that person, he's going to destroy Social Security, and he hasn't outlined anything to destroy Social Security, and that's a hypothetical. But if you say, look, if you vote for this person, they're not going to vote for this tax incentive that we've put in place on in this case, diapers and clothing. You're going to have to pay 6% on diapers and clothing. unless you elect me. And that is for sure, for certain, because this is going away. This is going to sunset, and it forces a debate on the issue. And of course, some people may say, well, I don't want to know if I want to do that. And it backs people into a corner. So sunsetting bills like this is an obvious way of kicking a political football and creating an opportunity for them later on down the road to say, look what I did for you. We've got another bill here of interest, Draft Bill 87 by Daniel Pfister. It's to require a moment of silence or reflection at the start of each school day and establish guidelines. So what is that? Well, here, let's show the main part of the bill here. The policy shall ensure that all pupils remain seated and silent and make no distracting display, so that each pupil may, in the exercise of his or her individual choice, meditate, pray, or engage in any other silent activity which does not interfere with, distract from, or impede other people's exercise of individual choice. The policy shall prohibit district personnel from providing instruction to any student regarding the nature of any reflection the student may engage in during the moment of silence or reflection. The policy shall require notification be sent to the parents or guardians providing information on policy, and encouraging parents and guardians to provide guidance to their pupils regarding the moment of silence or reflection. So obviously, this is a bill, I think, aimed at bringing some prayer back into the schools. The way this is being done, I'm not terribly against it. Obviously, I'm not against it at all. There's some people who would be against prayer in schools in the sense of saying, well, are you forcing religion on people and everything else? What this does is it say, look, we're going to provide an opportunity for anybody of any religion or any faith to take a moment or two of silence where they can pray, where they can instead meditate. If they're from a family of Satanists, they could pray to Baal or Satan or whoever the heck they Baal. Yeah, I think that's it. Baal. Anyways, and pray to whoever they want to. I guess they could do that. Obviously, if they're of, well, it depends on the timing as far as if they're of Muslim, Muslim religion, pray several times a day. But it gives a moment to bring prayer into schools. But more importantly, it says, look, we're not asking the teacher or the school to lead in prayer. What we're saying is provide this opportunity and then let the parents know we're providing this opportunity so they can tell them what they maybe want them to do at that moment, whether it is to pray or whether it is to say, just sit there for a minute and be silent. That's fine, or meditate or whatever. But, obviously somebody like me, if my kid did go to public schools, I homeschool him because of, reasons we'll talk about here in a bit. But in that case, I would instruct my son to go ahead and say a few prayers. And tell him, hey, if you want to do that, here's how we do that. Right. We go to church and everything else. So I think it is a interesting bill, a good idea, a good way to handle getting quote unquote prayer back in the schools without violating anybody's religious freedoms. And I think it's a good bill by Pfister. Of course, he's up for re-election this year. He's in Versailles. He's Woodford County, Jessamine County, and I think part of Fayette, or maybe he's got none of Fayette and Franklin County. He has some of. But anyways, and with the redistricting, now with this current stuff, he had a chunk of Fayette. So that's why, if I seem confused, that's why. But right now that's right. He's got Franklin now, part of Franklin, part of Jessamine, and all of Woodford County. That's Pfister. That's a bill he's put out. I know Pfister pretty well. I full disclosure, I do like the guy a lot, but regardless, I like the bill. It's a good bill, and it provides a good moment to say, look, we're going to protect religious liberties and allow an individual to take a moment to do so. Finally, we've got one more bill here, Schickel File Draft Bill 92. It's basically just a resolution to honor the airport on its 75th anniversary. Now, this is an interesting practice that some people take issue with, and that is this resolution practice. So sometimes you'll see things like, whether it is at the congressional level or federal Senate, things read into the record to create an official legislative record honoring somebody, whether it's for maybe a wedding anniversary or something like that. How do these people get chosen? A lot of times they're a supporter of said legislator or big donor or something like that. And a lot of times too, it's to signify something important in the region, or it's to create that good photo op. So in this case, Schickel passes this resolution. He's the sponsor. People vote yes, because who's going to vote no on honoring the airport? He gets down, has his little photo op where he's handing it off, or he can post about it or what have you. And the airport says, okay. Now, in and of itself, it's not a big deal. It's not the grossest government overreach or anything like that. And I don't think it's anything we necessarily need to go marching up to the steps about. But this practice of doing these types of things, it just, I've had people talk about it seems kind of wasteful, because it seems wasteful of time and to a degree tax dollars, but mainly time. And follow me here. Every year that we ask our legislators to get something done and they don't, they respond the same way. They say, look, we just didn't have the time. Well, it was a short session. We didn't have the time. Then when it's a long session, it is, well, we had to get done budgeting and everything else. We just didn't have the time. And so they constantly talk about, all the legislators do, how they don't have the time to get done the work we want them to get done. And the question becomes, how much does little things like this, like Schickel honoring, passing a resolution, which is just a little thing of the body saying, yep, we are honoring the airport for making it 75 years. Doing something like that, does that really, really, really accomplish anything for government? No, has no legal significance. It wastes some tax dollars. I'm sure it's a minuscule amount, because the bill, is pretty easy to whip up. It takes a few seconds to whip up. They probably have a template. Schickel probably writes it himself, honestly. They have a template, and then it works its way through the system, and it does burn some money, and it adds up. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they do, I think, like 100 of these every year. They do tons of these every year, and just at the state level, let alone the federal level. And so that certainly adds up and can take up time. It takes up time on the floor, but more importantly too, as we're dealing with this, you're sitting there saying you don't have time to pass the pieces of legislation we really want you to pass, but you do have the time to sign off on those types of legislation. And so as long as our legislators are using the excuse of, well, we just don't have the time to get done the work that we ask them to get done. If there's something else there, if they're saying, well, look, there's this, and this, but when you say we don't have the time, but then you pass bills like this, it certainly creates an air of skepticism and a slight dislike, for what you're saying there. So these kinds of bills definitely pull away from that. Okay, we're going to move on to our final segment now about JCPS schools. Now, I have to warn you, some of the conversation and some of the images here that I'm probably going to end up having to show are pretty graphic in nature and sexually graphic. And so it is not for the faint of heart, to say the least. These things are very obscene. They make a grown person blush, let alone for it to be in a school library. And so let's dig into it. So here's the situation, okay? Specifically, one book kind of kicks this off, and that is this gender queer book is what it's called. It's called Gender Queer. And Gender Queer is a graphic novel in the sense like it's a comic book style novel that's an autobiographical novel of a person who is gender queer. And it's not just that this book talks about those types of subjects, and the concern is kids are going to get this in their mind. No, these are sexually explicit things. So first, in the book Gender Queer, it mentions porn sites by name that really exist. Now, imagine if you were that you handed a list. Imagine a teacher handed a list of porn sites to your child. How would you feel? Imagine any adult handed any child a list of porn sites. Now, it's borderline illegal, as it would be distributing pornography to a minor, arguably, but also as well, it's morally reprehensible and certainly something I think all of us would take issue with. Well, in this book, Genderqueer, they mention real porn sites by name in the .com form that kids can go to. They can go visit. And it's pointing them in that direction. So that certainly right away, even if it's a normal written book with nothing else, the fact that anywhere in it has actual porn sites should lead to some questions. Because let's keep in mind, this book is in high schools. Kids as young as 14 years old have access to these books. And the other issue about them being in the school library is kids come in, they grab the book, they check them out. The librarians at these high schools are under no requirement to ask the parent permission for the kid to have that book. And there's no requirements to let the kid know what books are out. There's nothing. So it's not like these books are locked up and you got to come in with a special note from your parents saying you're allowed to read that book. Any child can go and grab a book without the parents knowing, without any adult there at all, just goes in, grabs a book procured for them by the schools and check it out. Now that seems wrong, doesn't it? Doesn't that seem like it'd be borderline illegal? Well, this book isn't just that. This book also has, this genderqueer book, also has some pretty sexually explicit conversations. I'm going to show you one of these photos here. This is from the comic book for those listening in audio form only. It shows a individual grabbing their jeans, and then I guess imagining getting it on with two dudes getting it on, and then and the words say for years, for years my standard method of masturbation was stuffing a sock into the front of my pants and manipulating the bulge. This would evolve into hip thrusting while thinking of my latest gay ship, driving just by rubbing the front of my jeans and imagining getting a blowjob. Okay. Wow. That's pretty graphic stuff, don't you think? Something you probably don't want your kid reading without your knowledge, huh? Something you don't want your kid at 14 years old having access to. Here's another one. I can't read it. I'm not going to read this one. But it shows apparently, if I had to read between some lines, this book is about a girl that identifies as a dude or maybe is genderqueer anyways. But it shows receiving the picture shows receiving a blowjob, but instead, because it's a girl, having a strap on and receiving, it's just porn. I mean, that's what it is. This is porn. And it's listing out porn websites. It's showing images like this. And we literally have to, not only do we have to catch this, not only does this mean that we have educators. I'm using this term now. They're not educators. They're groomer. That's grooming. Come on. If you're showing that to kids, can we please all agree on that? I know you're not supposed to say the word groomers and everything, but if you're showing that, can we? Come on. And God. Oh. And so somebody decided it was a good idea to put that in the library. Parent finds out. They asked these several, this is in several high schools across Jefferson County Public Schools, several high schools. And so they request from the schools, and there's 5 letters that I've read, and they all pretty much say the same thing. But I'm going to go with the Phoenix School of Discovery letter here. And so this parent puts in a request to remove the book from the library. Simply says, look, you either you have to approve every single one of my kids' checkouts. I have to approve them, or you just need to remove these books from the library. It is a lot more feasible just to remove them from the library. It's pretty unfeasible for you to just let me know every time my kid checks out a book. And this was the response by the school. I appreciate you meeting with Miss whatever these teachers are, 3 teachers, Gebbs, Dr. Reynolds, and Miss Block, I guess that's how you say name, and me on March 1st, 2022. We recognize, thank you for your concern for the students of our school community, as well as your devotion to their education. So this is in reconsideration, your recent request to pull the book Genderqueer, basically. This is their response. As you know, at the Phoenix School of Discovery, we provide a wide range of materials for students of all ages, beliefs, opinions, values, and interests in our school community. Our school community are diverse, and the collection at Phoenix is developed to reflect that diversity. First off, what's the key thing there? Students of all ages, meaning under 18. So if it would be illegal for me to show your child these things as a general adult, then it shouldn't be in the library because they are a minor. See, that's the first thing they mistake. Well, wide variety, yeah, but they're still a child whose parent is ultimately responsible for them. But we continue. Let me continue in this letter. Our mission is to engage students in a love of reading in partnership with their families. We respect the role of families in choosing the books they feel are best for their children, and always encourage parents to monitor and have discussions around their child's selections. Genderqueer was purchased for the Phoenix because having a positive, realistic portrayal. Positive. That's right. Positive. That was positive. Those images you just saw and words I had to read that make me throw up in my mouth are positive. And realistic portrayals of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer characters. See, this is what it really goes down into. This is what's interesting, right? The fact that you have to show sexually explicit images to children to give them a realistic portrayal of LGBTQ tells you that the entire ideologies are centered around who they get it on with. I know we talk about, well, gender is different than sex and blah, 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 but it is all about who they're getting it on with. And so when you're sitting there talking to your kids, if you're required to show those kinds of images so they get a realistic view of LGBTQ, and those images are sexual, then that tells you that any child under 18 years of age, you shouldn't be talking about LGBTQ with, because it is innately extremely sexual behavior. It isn't just, see, when we have the sex ed talk in schools, it's about procreation, how does the body work, anatomy, and everything else. And then it's up to the parents to teach their child what world they live in as far as relationships and sex goes. The schools just teach the kids about sex, supposedly, to teach them about reproduction and autonomy. Teach them about the body. But if you have to show those images, it is specifically LGBTQ stuff. And you have to show those images, as I said, it is then just about sex. That's all it's about for you. In teaching kids explicitly, in talking to them explicitly about sex, especially deviant sexual behavior, especially behavior under the age of 18, characters under the age of 18 getting it on. And it's not just this genderqueer book. There's other books that have come up in the search that are big issues where they're talking about these are books in our high schools. They're talking about kids under the age of 18 having which is a problem and shouldn't be allowed. But anyways, let's continue reading this book. Realistic portrayals allow students that are marginalized to see themselves in books, create acceptance, and save lives. Almost 25% of suicides between age 12 and 15 are LGBTQ. Additionally, students are rarely exposed to LGBTQ people and topics, and having these topics available produces a heightened sense of safety in their schools. Based on my review of Genderqueer, I've decided to retain this title in the collection for which its purchase will continue to only allow high school students to check out this book. So there you go. It saves lives. This school just said, we have to show your child porn to save their life. I'm going to say that again. It just said we have to show your child pornographic images. You saw them. I don't know how I can describe it any other way. That's why I had to show them, because you have to understand what they are what they're trying to cover for. It's awful. And they say that saves lives. If you need to see that to save your life, you're mentally ill. You are. I'm sorry. But if that's what you need to not commit suicide, is to read a book where you've got two, I'm assuming, women getting it on with a strap on to save your life, are you crazy? Obviously. We should be treating you with mental health treatments, not showing you pornography, but that's what it ultimately boils down to. That's why our children are having a mental health crisis. It's because we keep showing them stuff like this. It's clearly wrong. It's clearly a problem. Just probably 5 years ago, you'd go to jail for that stuff. So not only was this found in these schools, then they refused to remove it. And now there's a hearing going on regarding it in our at the school, at the JCPS is having it here. Sorry, JCPS, there's a current issue. I'm sorry. So apparently they appeal this up. So they appeal this up to a board, an SBDM appellate, they appellate whatever, and this concerned parent brought it up. Thank you for this parent to kind of fight on this thing. Her and her attorney, hop to it and decide, hey, we're going to do this. So I want to play you just the first few minutes of their trial here, and the only reason why is because I do think it is important that you hear kind of what they're saying here. So here we go.
When the book Genderqueer by Maya Kobe was brought to my attention, I was shocked. My reaction to the visuals of dildos, strap-ons, oral sex, and references to kink.com was enough for me to want to stand up and become a voice against obscenity in JCPS school libraries. I've been told this book, Genderqueer, is necessary for children to see themselves and feel accepted. I believe that all children should be accepted and loved. Accepting and loving children does not mean putting pornography in their hands. What adult would want to rob someone of their childhood innocence? I found those adults. They were the school principals, the school leadership teams, and the JCPS superintendent. As I began the dispute process per JCPS policy, they all collectively disagreed that graphic pictures of oral sex, dildos, strap-ons, and advertisements for porn sites are obscene material for children. Just to be clear, I looked up kink.com, and the first thing that comes up is pick your porn, straight or gay. So this book literally has the potential to lead children as young as 14 years old to actual pornography on the internet. As a mother of four, I believe the JCPS decision makers should aid in the process of protecting children from obscene pornographic content, regardless of a child's sexual identity or orientation, especially without parental knowledge or consent. Thank you.
And when we talk about obscenity under Kentucky law, we are talking about pornography, just a different synonymous word that Kentucky uses in the statutes for Kentucky law. But I'd like us to think about some questions. Even if the distribution of porn to children was not a crime under Kentucky law, under what scenario would it be okay for a public school to do that? Do we really need a law to tell us that it's wrong? How does this promote the welfare of our community and the next generation? By sexualizing children when it contributes to known harm and risks of pornography, of obscenity. Those are some of the questions that are issued here.
So as you can, that was just a small thing there. If you go to JCPS exposed.com, they have some of the materials there, JCPS exposed.com. Also that was video from the Courier Journal article on that. So you can just search, I just searched Courier Journal, genderqueer JCPS. It's the article that came up. That's just some of the video of the hearing. I'm waiting to hear what the outcome is, but I mean, that was Ms. Stovall and her attorney, and and I've said it. I mean, we've all said it is. It is a sad, sad thing that we even have to have this conversation. It is a sad, sad world we live in that anybody would defend that. Not only would defend it, but we have people that not only are defending that, we have people that are defending that and then using your tax dollars to fund it and push it and then fight against us when we're saying, look, that's too much. It's too much. It's too much. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Once again, please donate to the campaign. Andrew, the number 4, ky.com. Andrew, the number 4, ky.com. Please share this with your friends, your family, your neighbors, and let's stay informed on what's going on in the state. And I will see you next week.